Welcome back, Graphic 1 students. What we're going to do now is, now that you've watched the intro to what this class is about, we're going to dig right in and have you open up Photoshop and learn a few techniques today. So the first thing you can do is find your Photoshop. So you can either click on your little start menu down here, and you'll notice you'll scroll through and you'll see some different Adobe programs. You can just click on Adobe Photoshop 2020. Or if you can click your search menu, you can just start typing in Photoshop and you'll notice that Adobe Photoshop 2020 comes on. So just go ahead and click on that to open up the program. I already opened up the program to speed the process along a little bit. You'll notice once you start working in Photoshop, when you open it up, you might see some recent documents. So you could just click on that to open up documents you've been working on. The other option then is to create a new. So you can either click on Create New to get a new option, or if you go up to the top, go to File, New, and it'll bring you to the same screen. You'll notice here, I'm just going to move my face over a little bit. You'll notice over here on the right-hand side, it gives you the options of how big you want to make your paper. Typically, we'll be working in 8 wide by 11 tall. That's about the size of computer printer paper. So if you do make something that you want to print off in color, we could print it on normal computer paper. If you want to work in landscape size, you would make the width 11 and the height 8. So go ahead and click Create. What you should get is a document that is a blank document on your paper. The layout of Photoshop is, I'm going to move this up here now so you can see the different options. The layout on the top, it gives you all of your different commands that you can use. Again, File was to either open up a new document, open up an existing document. There's different things. When you save, you can go to this option to save. And we'll get through those throughout the course of this quarter. Under the edit option, you can undo something or redo it. What's nice about this is it tells you shortcut keys for all this. So if you want to undo something, you push Control Z. If you want to redo something, you can push Shift Control Z, and so on. Just gives you a bunch of different options there. Under image, different things, you can change the mode to grayscale or keep it in color. You can put adjustments onto different photos that you copy and paste in, or things that you've drawn. So brightness and control, exposure, hue and saturation, those are some of the big ones we're going to use. There's going to be a lot of different things that we go over. I don't expect you to remember them all. I just kind of wanted to go over some of the options for you today. A thing called layers. We're going to talk about layers today and why it's important to work in layers for your artwork. And then there's some different options that we'll get to eventually. On the left-hand side here, this is what we call the toolbar, because it's basically a bar that has all the different tools in. Right now it's set up in one single row. You'll notice under each option, if I just hover my mouse over the top, it'll tell me what it is, and a lot of times it'll do a little video display of what it actually does. So that's the move tool. If I click my mouse and hold, it gives me different options underneath. The one below that is called the selection tool. So again, if I hold it over, you'll see it tells you it's the rectangular marquee tool, and it gives a little demonstration on how to use that tool. And that tool is used to select different options. If I click and hold, it gives me an elliptical marquee tool, a single row, and a single column. The one below that is a lasso tool, also used for selecting. Click and hold again, we have the polygon lasso tool, magnetic lasso tool, and we'll be going over those tools and what those tools do. So again, this is the tool bar where you have all your different tools. Then across the top, right here where my mouse is pointing, this is called the brush selector bar. And it is called that because you can do different options within it. So say I picked on my brush tool. I can go up here and I can click my drop down. And there's no tool presets here, so you can add some. Or I can click the drop down here and I can change the size of my brush to make it bigger or smaller. So that'll tell you the pixels. The hardness, so I can make the edges harder or the edges softer. I can also pick different types of brushes. So if I have a drop down here, I can pick a soft round brush, a hard round brush, and it'll change those settings up there for me. So if I do the hard edge, notice the hardness goes automatically to 100%. If I click the soft edge, the hardness goes to 0%. It also has default sizes, but you can also change the size depending on which brush tip you want to use. So you can do different brush tips through the brush selector bar. You can change opacity. You can change smoothing options. So just a lot of different options in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing is over on the right-hand side, you have your color selection tool. You also have what's most important that we're going to be talking about a lot is your layers. So in your layers, think of this as your background sheet of paper. We never want to draw on the background because with computer aided art, the nice thing about it is that you can edit and move stuff around, resize it after you draw it, as opposed if you were to draw it on regular sheet of paper. So that's your background. So we typically don't want to draw anything on the background because we want to be able to manipulate it, change the color, change the size, move it around, maybe move it behind something, in front of something. So we're going to do what's called creating new layers. So in this option, what I can do is I can click on the right side box here. It's like 3 little bars. That gives us more options. You'll see the very top one says make a new layer. It also gives us that shortcut key. So if you're, again, a shortcut person, you can push Shift, Control, and N to make a new layer. It'll ask you what you want to label it. We're just going to call this black line for now. You can label your layers. Once you get your layer over there, you can actually change it. So I can double click it and maybe I want to call it black lines instead. So you can change the name of your layers as well. Notice it shows like a little checkerboard symbol. That is because there's actually nothing on that layer right now. It's not even white like the sheet of paper. Think of it as a clear, transparent sheet that you can draw on and you can move around and manipulate. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the brush tool. Notice on the very bottom here, I'm going to change this little setting here. So notice how I changed it from a single row because I can't actually see everything in the bottom unless I move this up. So I'm going to change it from a single row to just clicking that double arrow to make it a double row so that you can see everything a little easier. We called this black line. Down on the bottom of the toolbar, you'll see that there is 2 different colors. This is considered your foreground color. Again, if I hold my mouse over the top, it should tell me it's the foreground color and the background color. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the black. That's my foreground, so that's the color my brush tool is. And I'm just going to start drawing some black lines. Okay. So you can just use those lines. Again, you can change it if you want the hardness and the edge to be a little sharper. Notice how that is a lot more bold. This one is a softer edge. You can also change colors by clicking on the color swatch, and I can change it to a different color. Red here shows the preview of what it looks like. If I slide this bar up and down, notice how it changes the different colors. So maybe let's do a blue line. And I can change that from light blue to dark blue by moving my little circle around. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now I can draw some blue lines in. All right. The nice thing about working in layers is that I can use my mover tool and I can move those around on the paper. Say I didn't draw them in the right spot. I can also change the size of them in case I want to make them bigger or smaller. So I can go up to Edit, Free Transform, and notice it gives me a little box around the outside. So I can go to the corner and I can make it bigger and smaller. I can also move it to the outside. Notice how it gives me a curved line now. And I can rotate and move it around. Maybe I drew it upside down or I just want to put it upside down. I can rotate it. Once you get your transform set the way you want it, you can hit your check mark and that'll set your transformation. You can still move it around, but it'll set it from the size change. If you say I drew these 2 little dashes in here and I don't want them, another tool, so that was the brush tool. Another tool that we can use is called the eraser tool. Again, you can change the size of your eraser. So I made my eraser a little bigger and I can erase those black lines. Okay. Now here's where making new layers is important. Remember I had a new layer by clicking on this box and going new layer. You'll find in Photoshop that there is more than one way to do a lot of different applications. So if I go down to the bottom, and if I just hover my mouse over, you'll see it says create a new group. If I hover it over this one, it's create a new layer. So I'm going to go ahead and click. It automatically pops up a new layer. And I'm just going to call this one red square. Okay, now I know I'm going over a lot of different things right now, and you may feel like you're lost. I'm going to give you, in a few minutes here, or 1 minute, I'm going to give you a time to pause the video, and you can go ahead and practice these techniques. So let's say a red square. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a rectangle marquee tool, and I'm just going to make a square. Now, if you wanted a perfect square, I'm just going to hold shift down on my keyboard. Notice now when I move my mouse, it keeps it in a perfect square. Okay. Now I want to fill this square with red. So I'm going to change my color. So I'm going to change my color swatch up here to red. Now to fill this in, one more new tool for you is called a paint bucket. Sometimes you have to search for the tools until you kind of get familiar with where they are. But there's a tool called gradient here. If I click and hold, I can go to paint bucket. I can move over to my square and I can just click on it and it'll fill that whole selected area in with red. So now I have two layers. I have a layer called black line and a layer called red square. And my red square is selected. So if I were to try to draw outside of this area, it will not let me. Okay, I'm going to flip this little arrow just so I got white. It'll let me draw inside, but as soon as I get to the outside, it won't let me draw because it's selected. Now, if I have this area that is painted in white and I'm like, oh, I really didn't want to do that. Remember, you can go up to edit and undo brush tool, and I can go edit, undo brush tool again, and it gets rid of them. The nice thing about layers is if I want to move just the red square around, I can move the red square without moving the background. If I go up to select and deselect, so I have nothing selected now, I can click on whatever's on that layer, or I can select the layer by going over to the right-hand side and pushing black lines, and I can move that one around. Now I can also reorder the layer. So if I want my lines in front of my square, I can just click on the layer called black lines and drag it up. Notice there's kind of a little blue line that shows. So now I have my lines in front of my square. Okay. At this time, if you would like to just pause the video, you can go ahead and practice creating new layers. You can also practice using the brush tool. You can practice erasing, resizing by going up to edit and free transform. Remember, that was where we can resize or rotate the image. And once you get your transform set, maybe I want to make it so it fits inside of my red square. Once you get the transform set, you can hit your check mark. And then we also showed you how to make a selection box and then use the paint bucket and fill in that selected area. So go ahead and pause it right now. Take some time, practice the things that we've done. And when you unpause it, you'll have some more new techniques. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you had a chance to practice some of those techniques and go through those different things that we talked about. Please know that you will have time and you will, with the more practice, you will be able to remember where these things are. I know I'm throwing a lot of things at you to start with here. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to practice some more of those techniques of the basic tools of Photoshop. So the next one we're going to show is I'm going to make another new layer. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my new box layer, and I'm just going to title this one orange. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make things disappear as well without erasing them. So say I want to draw an orange on here, but I kind of want to get rid of the red square and the lines just to make it easier. You'll notice in my layers option, if I close the eye on the tool, they just disappear, but my layers are still there. I can click that eye and bring them back at any time. But I'm going to make them disappear just so I can focus on making my orange. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my elliptical marquee tool, and I'm going to make a circle. Now, do you remember how to make it so it's a perfect circle, just like we did with square? If you guessed hold down shift key, you are correct. So now when I move this, it'll stay a perfect circle for me. Now I'm going to fill this in with orange. So I'm going to take my little square, my foreground color swatch. I'm going to slide this up till I get kind of a color of orange that I want. Go ahead and click OK. Again, to fill it in, I'm going to click on my paint bucket and go ahead and just fill it in. But as it is right now, my orange looks more just like a circle. Okay, it's very flat looking. It doesn't have any value to it, and it doesn't look three-dimensional. So I want to try to get this to make it look like it's rounded. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some new tools here. I'm going to pick a little bit darker color orange than what I had before. So you'll notice how I have a light orange that I filled this area in, when I have a little darker one in the foreground. I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'm just going to brush in some areas. Okay, let's say the light source is coming from the top right. So I want this part of my orange to be a little bit darker. Okay, now as it stands, or as I've painted it here, it is a very abstract 3D image because the dark orange and the light orange, there's just a line that divides them. It's not blended and smooth together. So another new tool, if I click and hold down on the paintbrush tool, you will see what's called a mixer brush tool. What the mixer brush tool will do, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. It is like taking a brush and adding water to your paint. Okay, so if I click and hold now, notice how it looks like it's kind of smearing and smudging. It's adding water to the colors that I have down on my canvas. And I can blend and smooth those out to make it look like, if I want to drag a little bit more of this darker orange, I can click my mouse on the darker part and just drag up. If I want to drag a little bit lighter, I can just drag that down. So kind of work with your mouse and kind of work just to smooth and blend those different values together. So now we have what looks like a three-dimensional orange. The next step I'm going to show you is actually using Photoshop, and it actually has a tool where you can put a gradient into an image. Okay, so I'm going to leave that orange on there for now. I'm going to click a new layer, and I'm just going to title this New Orange, so I know that the difference between my original orange and the one I'm going to be working on now. I'm going to go ahead and make a new circle. So let's just hold Shift again. I'm going to make a new circle, and I'm just going to overlap it for now with the other one. I already have my two values in here. Okay, so I'm going to make it look like my light orange is on top and my dark orange is on the bottom. I'm going to go to my paint bucket and I'm going to hold down. Okay, so you notice how the paint bucket, and then we have a gradient tool. So this tool is going to be very useful because you can use that to automatically apply gradients. Up in your brush selector bar, we have a few different options we can go with. You'll notice how it shows it goes from light to dark. But now up on the top, this is the one that's going to be important for what type of image you're filling in with a gradient. You have a linear gradient. You have a radial gradient, an angle gradient, reflected, and diamond. Today we're just going to talk about the radial gradient because we're working with something that is round like a sphere. Okay, if it was something that was flat, like a board or a desk or something like that, we might use the linear gradient. But we want to use the radial gradient. And what this will do is whatever color is on top will be your first color. So if I click in the middle and I drag out, it'll automatically blend from light to dark, radiating out from that center point. Say I wanted my light source more over here, I can just redo this as long as it's selected, and I can drag it out. Okay, the further you drag it, the more gradual the gradation blend will be. So I'm going to go ahead and push select and deselect. And now I can take and I can move this around, but notice the difference. I'm going to click on this orange and move it. Notice the difference between the two. Okay, the one that we use, the computer aided gradient, it's very smooth. It's a gradual blend from light to dark. The one that we painted the orange on, then we painted darker orange and we used the water mixer tool. You can kind of see the areas where you have the brush strokes, and it gives it kind of more of an artistic drawing feel to it. So depending on what type of effect that you want to come across in your artwork, you can either use the computer aided gradient, or you can use the gradient where you apply the colors and add the water with the water mixer brush tool found under the brush tool. At this time, you can go ahead and pause it, and you can practice those techniques of different types of gradients. All right, welcome back again. I'm going to show one more series of imagery that you can work on, and then you can go ahead and practice those and use the rest of the class time to practice any of the techniques. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work a little bit with the layers and show you how to kind of reorder layers a little bit more, show you how to copy things that are on a layer, and show you how to select things that are within a layer in case you want to change the colors. All right, so let's go back to our original orange. So right now that orange is a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go up to Edit, Free Transform, and I'm going to hold Shift on my keyboard to keep it perfectly round, and I'm going to try to get it to about the same size. Okay. Right now this orange is behind this one. Again, reordering, if I click on the layer, I can drag up, and I can make my drawn orange go in front of the other one. Now let's say I want to make 4 or 5 oranges. I can just, since this orange is the only thing on this layer, I can right click on the layer and it gives me some options. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the layer. I'm going to click OK. So now I have an orange copy. Okay, you'll see the orange and orange copy, but I don't see an extra orange. What it actually did, I'm going to select my mover tool. It copied it right over the top of the other one. Okay, so now I have multiple oranges. Let's go ahead and just get rid of the computer aided one for now. I'm going to go ahead and make another copy. So I'm going to duplicate my layer again. It's going to automatically keep adding a number to the copies for me. And whenever I make a copy of a layer, it'll put it right over the layer I copied, so I can just move it around. I'm going to make another copy. So I'm going to duplicate layer, click OK, and I'm going to move that layer in front. Okay, so now I have 4 oranges that are kind of grouped together. Now, one thing is this orange is in the background, so you may want to make that one a little bit smaller. Sometimes I can just click on the little eye icon to figure out what's on which layer. I can go to Edit, Free Transform, and make my background orange just a little bit smaller and kind of tuck it in. I may want to click on this one and move it up a little bit depending on where I'm going to have these oranges placed. All right, so right now my oranges are all on different layers. If I want to move them, say I want to make them all a little bit smaller, I could click on each layer and manually do each one smaller. But if I know I have them all in the right spot, I can merge these layers together so all the oranges are just on one layer. If I right click, again, I can click on an option. It's towards the bottom. I can go merge down. Okay, now when I close that eye, notice how those 2 layers are together. I'm going to do the same thing to merge those 2 onto my orange copy. So I'm going to right click, merge down, and now I have 3 of them. Right click, merge down, and now I have all 4 of them on a separate layer. Okay, they're all a separate layer from the rest, but they're all in the same layer. So now when I go to Edit, Free Transform, I can resize them all together. I can even take that now and duplicate that layer. So now it's going to duplicate all 4. So now I have 8 oranges. Okay, so that is how you use the layers to duplicate images. You can reorder them, resize them individually, and then I also showed you how to merge layers together. All right, now the next step is I'm going to go to my new orange layer. And let's say instead of an orange, I wanted to change that to purple. So now I'm going to select my light purple and dark purple because I want to use that fancy gradient tool to change that with the gradient. An issue that you might have is that if I select gradient, I want to make sure I'm on radial again. If I try to change this to purple, it's actually going to change my whole paper. Okay, even though I'm on that orange layer. So I'm going to do my shortcut, Control Z to undo it, or if you forget the shortcut, you can go to Edit and Undo. If I'm using the gradient tool, I need to make sure that I have my image selected. Okay, there is a tool that is going to be one of your best friends probably in this class. If I click and hold under the Object Selection tool, I have different things. I have a Magic Wand tool, a Quick Selection tool, and an Object Select tool. I'm going to do the Magic Wand first just to show you. I'm selected on my new orange layer. I'm going to click my area. Notice how it doesn't quite select all the orange. What the magic wand will do is it'll select pixels within a certain color range. Up on the top, there is something called a tolerance. Right now it's set at 32. If I was to increase that to say 100, I'm going to deselect. Now when I select that area, notice how it selects the whole orange because it's choosing 100 different colors of orange within that color range. So it tells me that from my light orange to my dark orange, those are all within 100. So now I have my whole orange selected, okay? I'm just going to deselect that because I want to show you different selection options. There's also what's called a quick selection tool, where if I hold it and drag it across, notice how it just selected my whole orange right away. Okay, so depending on what type of colors you have, what type of things that are merged all on the same layer, this one's nice because I just have the orange on the layer and there's nothing else. But if I had an orange, a banana, a pear, and I just wanted to select the orange, it might not work as easy. Just something that you have to kind of work through and figure out which selection tool works best for you. Now what I'm going to do is, since I have it selected, I'm going to use that gradient tool again, and now I can change the color to purple. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make multiple. This looks like a grape now. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make multiple ones of it, but I want to free transform it because that's a pretty big grape. So let's shrink this down. I just double clicked it, or you can hit that check mark to set it. Couple different options now. We could either just right click and keep copying and pasting or duplicating the layer. But since I have it selected, I can actually go up to edit and copy. Shortcut is Control C for copy. So now I copied everything that was in the selection. Now I can go to edit and paste. And what that'll do is you'll notice it puts it on a new layer. So I'm going to relabel this one to grape. I clicked on it to relabel it. Now I have layer 1 and I can move it. So I have grape and layer 1. I can go to edit, paste again. Notice the shortcut is Control V. I'm going to use that one in a little bit here. And I can move my grape. So I'm just going to hit Control V. So this way may be a little quicker if you want to make, and you want to make a lot of different copies of the image. So instead of right clicking, duplicate layer, move the layer, I'm just pushing Control V because I had copied my image already. And what that'll do is that'll keep pasting more grapes onto the area. Okay, so now I have a bunch of different grapes. Maybe I'm like, oh, I want a few more back here, but now it's on top of it. So you'll just need to take this layer 13 and I can drag it down to the bottom underneath the word grape. And now I have that grape back behind there. Now, what if I want to merge these grapes together? You may have 50 items. Right now I probably have about 15, 7, 8, 9, 10. Exactly 15 here. I could go to my top layer of my grapes and I could click on it and I could right click and merge down. But the more items you have, the longer it's going to take to merge all those. So another option to merge, especially if you have a ton of multiple images, first thing I need to do is get rid of the background. Okay, so I'm just closing the eye. I'm not deleting it. I'm just closing the eye to get rid of it. So now I'm going to merge everything I see. I don't want to have my oranges visible because that'll merge all that onto one layer. The only thing I have visible is just my grapes. So my background is not visible in any other item. Now I'm just going to select one of the layers. So here's my layer of oranges. Right click. And now instead of going merge down, I'm going to merge visible. So merge visible means it's going to merge everything that you can see on your document. Merge visible. What that did was it took all those grapes and instantly just merged them all onto one layer. Bring my background back up. Now I have grapes. Now I have oranges in my image. I can even bring back my lines if I want, or my square. Maybe this square I'm going to turn into a basket or something. So I'm going to show you one more thing to do, and then you'll just have time to work on all those options. So I'm going to go ahead and go up to edit. Same thing as in free transform, but instead I'm just going to go to regular transform. Move over. I can click on distort, and I can distort the image as well. So I can not only just change the size of it and rotate it, I can change the shape of my image as well. And now I'm starting to create a basket. Obviously it's flat. I'd want to add some gradations and textures into it. But I wanted to show you that option of transform as well. So we've gone over a lot of things in this video. I've asked you to pause a few different times so you can go and practice your techniques. Just a quick little review is we went over creating new layers. You can either click this box and click on new layer and label it, or you can click this little plus sign down here next to the trash can, and that automatically makes a new layer for you. We talked about drawing your items on different layers, especially, I want my grapes on a different layer than my oranges, on a different layer than my basket, so I can remove and manipulate each one of those individually. We talked about the mover tool, so you can click an item and move it around. We talked about the rectangular and elliptical marquee tool to select certain areas and fill them in with color. We talked about the magic wand tool and the quick selection tool to select an item so you can work on those items. We also talked about the brush tool. Again, I'm just clicking down on the item to bring up the other options. We talked about the brush tool and the color replacement tool, or the mixer brush tool. Sorry, we didn't do color replacement yet. But brush tool to add color, the mixer brush tool to add water for blending. We talked about the eraser tool, where you can click on it and erase different areas. Just one note on the eraser is that since I'm selected on the orange layer, it will only let me erase the orange layer. Okay, if I wanted to try to erase the grapes, it won't let me. So you'll have to make sure that you're selected on the grape layer to erase the grapes. We also talked about undoing since I did that area. If you hit Control Z, or if you go to Edit, Undo Eraser, or Control Z again, will undo those different areas. We talked about the gradient tool, filling in a selected area with a gradient. Remember, with the gradient tool, the area has to be selected. We talked about the paint bucket tool. Now, the difference with this one is, say I wanted this basket to be a different color. Remember, with the gradient tool, you had to select the area first. With the paint bucket tool, I just need to make sure that I'm selected on that layer. And anything that is red now, when I click the paint bucket, it'll turn it to green. We also talked about the color swatches, where you can click on the color swatch and change your different colors using the slider bar, and then change the value of your color by moving the circle in the middle. So from light to dark. You can flip-flop your colors. So if you're working in two different colors, like the orange, light orange to dark orange, or the light purple to dark purple, you can change your colors in the two different swatches. So I can maybe make this one a darker green now. So now I have, I want to select on my background color. So now I have my light green, dark green, and I can even use this little arrow to flip-flop them. So hopefully you learned a little bit, showed you a lot of different tools, and you probably won't remember them all, but at least gives you a chance to kind of practice them and just know what the program can do, and get you started.